Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment, a podcast devoted to helping you overcome challenges in your life that prevent you from becoming the best version of yourself. Each episode features interviews with people from all walks of life about their journey of self-development and the principles they utilize to overcome their fears to achieve their desired outcome. Ready to be enlightened? Here's your host, Ken Primus.
To another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, this is one of my favorite spaces within this conversation, and that is to welcome our guests, because I know they're coming with a couple of things I personally deem very, very expensive, their time. What a precious commodity. 24 hours has been offered to every single one of us here on this planet. Now, how you love her, how you respect her, how you honor her will tell me much about you. The other is the journey. The journey is a powerful creator. It created Marcus, who's before us, and so we want to honor him for him coming and sharing these precious commodity with us. And I invite those listeners to become hearers, because the Bible tells us, because I grew up Christian, that the hearers of the word, those guys get things done because they become the doers. And so I want to invite you guys to come in, listen, but change and transition to become a hearer and doer so that you can change and revolutionize your life. Marcus, thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
And Brian, thank you for sharing your platform. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent. One of the questions that I ask, or actually the very first question that I ask the guests when they show up, is how do you serve mankind? A loaded question, because I want others to understand that this journey here on this life is not all about you. We go through our individual journey to come out to the other side to become a servant. So how do you serve mankind?
Yeah. In Rome, there's a sign that says, "Know thyself and you'll understand the secrets of gods and men," in the Delphi with the oracle. Yeah. The way I serve people is by bringing their awareness to the awesomeness that is already with them, bringing their awareness to their inner space. As we were talking before this recording, I believe we are born whole and we are born as creators, breaking into newer realms. Yeah. However, we've been told stories, whereas we're less than. So I want to bring people's awareness to the glory that is with them, the divine that is within them, the fullness that is with them. And I do that with the words. So, yeah.
Yeah, that is powerful. I've been educating the audience for many years now that there's a creator that is residing within them, that they need to give permission to take the lead in their life. And when they do that, things will change, because the creator has the ability to create. So one of the things that we do here, Marcus, one of the spaces that we begin this beautiful journey, I like to tell people, I try to get you to jump into that time machine that is called the memory. And we are now going to visit a couple of spaces that we're usually there for a few years. And one of the very space that we start is the family. It is this unit where we have a couple of strangers. Mom and dad are strangers, you stranger to mom, but mom and dad and your siblings and every one of us, we have some trauma that cause a certain perspective. Mom and dad have their perspective based on their personal trauma. And so they are now, these two individuals are going to deposit data into you. What was your family like?
All right. I'm a third culture kid. And what that means is my mom's from the Philippines, my dad's from the Bahamas, and I was born in California. And it's where your passport or your identity doesn't necessarily match that of your parents or the country where you grew up. And also in this conversation, I'll say, just so that we know, for me, what trauma means, and we'll exchange it back and forth. Trauma means unprocessed stress. So there was a stressor that happened, and the person has yet to process it. So it's a blockage, right? And the reason I say that is because sometimes you could receive stress or you can experience it, but it passes through you, or it didn't necessarily get locked in your body because you didn't recognize it as stress.
Yeah.
Now, explain my family upbringing. It was a family of love. There was contention between my parents. They did divorce when I was 12, and I moved with my father to the Bahamas. I went back every summer to be with my mom in California. And that wasn't directed at me, though, you know?
Yeah.
Let's see. It was, if to say what was the trauma of my upbringing, because you're right, everybody does have stressors as kids or as young people that we have to learn how to alchemize and process as we grow up. Mine was communication. That informs the work that I do. And it was communication with my father.
Yeah.
There's this awesome picture behind me. You can't see it, but it's a father and son
Yeah.
in the Bahamas. It was, again, in reflection, no shaming, no blaming, no complaining to him. He just wasn't equipped to deal with a preteen or a teenage boy who wasn't against him. But I mean, we found contention there.
Mm-hmm.
And understandably, actually, that's the work that I do, educating parents and being an advocate for the adolescent in the home of what's happening and how do you connect and communicate with that. So that was one of the primary stressors. And I used to process it through poetry. I used to process it through sincere prayer with the divine. And I think that actually influences how I show up now too. Did I stutter there, or we're still good? All right. I had 3 older brothers, but they had all gone on to college. They'd all done their own thing. I had 3 older brothers. I'm the youngest of 4. And you know what? I think a big part of my stress also that informs my work is, like I told you, I was saying I'm the youngest of 4 boys. And I think one thing that also informs my work is, like I said, I grew up Christian, Seventh-day Adventist, sincerely. And it was never a burden for me. But I think what it did teach me was to be peculiar and to be comfortable in my identity as different. As you see, I have an afro. I show up in spaces where it's multicultural, but I'm the only person who looks like me there. And because I knew that I was unique in spaces, but I knew the spirit of which I'm bringing things. Like I was bringing the divine spirit. And it wasn't like to beat other people over the head with, because I never beat anybody over the head with my beliefs. Like, believe what you believe. I'm cool with that, but I know why I practice what I practice. I think those 2 major things inform what I do. Yeah, my communication with my father, with my my communication with the divine, and then the communication with my earthly father. Yeah. Thank you for that question.
I think as I mentioned earlier, that I believe that the creator in us will take that trauma or that situation and convert it, begin to change it, if you will, whereby the creator will use it to now become the servant to assist those that are familiar with that type of pain. And so we go through that. So that's why I tell individuals, it will eventually become that superpower that you will be known by. But it takes time for you, first of all, to discover it, and then to learn how to manage it, how to utilize the energies and so forth, the wisdom, the insights and stuff. And then you will begin to change it, and you will take it and you will see thread lines within your journey, and you will start formulating your identity, and you will then have your program, or however, your book or whatever it is, based on your identity, to speak to others. So it's a beautiful thing. The pain eventually becomes the glory that we walk with,
And the purpose.
and the wisdom and the honor and the purpose that we are able to help others. So yeah, it's a beautiful mess, Marcus, that eventually works out within the process of, people call it self-development. So here this young man understands the importance of communication, saw that there was lacking communication between dad. You had mom in a different area, and you're in the midst of that. And it's always a interesting mix to have a divorce and a young individual within that who gets to witness some of the languages, if you will, the pain going back and forth through words. How did Marcus, this young man that understood that he had some communication issues with dad, how did he manage himself with this, dealing with mom and dad? How did he relate to himself and then to others?
Yeah, thank you. Ken, I promise this is the last interruption. I'm going to open the door for someone who just knocked.
No, that's okay.
But
That's okay.
the question, I have an answer right. So fortunately, my parents never directed their frustration or the turmoil that was going between them at me. And my father made a point not to speak bad of my mother to me.
Yeah.
And my mother the same. So she didn't speak ill of my father. That said, I notice it more, the wisdom in looking back at it.
Yeah.
My father was going through the stress of moving to a new country, moving back to his home country. He himself is a high achiever, A-type personality. So he's highly stressed. And then there's me going through my adolescence. Like he would understand it as something personal happening towards him, and he didn't know how to manage the stress.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then how did I manage it and how did I cope? I think that's where my sincere prayer life came from, to actually have conversation with the divine, to actually be seen, soothed, and knowing that I was secure. I've never felt threat of my life from my father in the sense of violence. That wasn't part of our narrative. Also, having community. My aunts were here. He's from a family of 8. Family is very important to us. Also being part of the community of faith. Like, there's sincere people who I owe a lot to. While my father was, being a single dad, but I could go to them, I could speak to them, and I could process stuff there. So in my writing, in the conversations that I had, in the connections I had with my community, all of that fed into still, the man that you see before you today. And that's what helped get me through that. And again, you know what's awesome, Ken? So, sorry, like,
great.
I'm looking, like, thank you for these questions, because I'm looking back at that with gratitude, and I'm realizing that is informing the work that I do today. That is why I give and bring this message.
Yeah, that's where it begins, Marcus. That's why I
The
have
dots connect
this.
themselves.
Yes, the dot, and that's why I call it Threads of Enlightenment. They literally connect themselves as we engage in accessing our memories of our situation, and we see that thread that becomes us. And it's all of it, everything. I tell people there's nothing wasted within your life, no position, nothing wasted, because God is not wasteful. He knows how to take things that may look bad and convert it, and it's one of his specialty, and that is why he has us, because we are creators as well, and it's one of our specialties as well. So go ahead.
In all traditions, there is a phrase of saying, thy will be done. In Latin, we have Dio volente. In Islam, we have Inshallah. In the Christian tradition, they say God willing, or God's will be done.
Yeah.
So it's always recognizing, again, we're collaborating with higher forces and greater powers. And if the creator in ourselves, to use your language, acknowledges it and allows it, it's a whole different wide. There's not that contention or conflict. It's collaboration. Yeah, it
becomes what the Bible says, the walk of faith. We don't have the answers, but we have a collaborator that we can have a conversation with. And he sometimes, we find ourselves in a situation where he is telling us, I need you to go here. And we're looking at him going, I'm not sure about that. But as we learn to collaborate and surrender, which is very important in the process of the journey, I tell people, because I read the Bible where Jesus had a situation, an opportunity where he had to surrender, because he was in this garden and he was having a discussion, if you will, with his dad. And the discussion came to the point where he was sweating blood. And I haven't been there yet where I was sweating blood when I had my conversation with him. But eventually he did say, you know what? As you said earlier, not my will, but your will. I will surrender to it. And when we do that, it ushers into ourselves another aspect of the journey. We don't know what that is, but it is here. So here is this young man. He is bringing in a couple of tools that I think is very important in one's journey. You must have a relationship with your God. You have to know, because you're going to learn some things about you there. The other is you have tools. Marcus talked about poetry, writing, things that expression. Those are powerful tools that one can utilize in your dark spaces to help you to give clarity, bring a chance to empty out yourself, if you will. It may be a mess, but you'll look back sometimes in those places. I remember mine, Marcus, when I was going through some stuff, I'd look back in some of those pages and it was dark as ever, man. I was like, whoa, that boy needed some help. And so, but I came through it. So here's this young man. He is looking at his future now. He's exiting high school, and I know the West Indian family about education. What was the discussion when it comes to one moving forward in the direction of education? Which industry did you pick, and why did you pick it?
You know, I'll say this. Here's my father's book right next to me. My father wrote a book called Barefoot to Boardroom.
Yeah.
He is from Andros, South Andros, an island here in the Bahamas. He literally went from barefoot to the boardroom. He values education and got his PhD because he knew education was the way in which he was going to get off the island. And he knew he wanted to get off the island. And I say that all to say, one of the, again, in retrospect, is beautiful. I told my dad the other day, I said, for better or for worse, you always allowed me to be who I am.
Yeah.
And that, again, that feeds into the work that I do now. I pursued journalism. At first it was CIS, Computer Information Systems, because I was good with computers. But I loved poetry and I loved writing. And I said, okay, the best way in which I could do this commercially is, or make money with this, is go into journalism. There's actually a poem I wrote. It said, my son, what good could a man gain by reading words beneath another man's name? And it says, my father, what is all this world's riches, silver and gold? If I lose my passion and soul, I am going to be a poet. Because we did have that conversation.
Yeah, wow.
And I studied communication, journalism. Those were the seeds of I remember Dr. Elliott, my communication teacher at Oakwood. She said, the level of your communication is directly related to the quality of your communication is directly related to the quality of your life. And I honestly believe that. How well do you speak to yourself, and how well do you speak and connect with others?
I absolutely believe it. It's the stories that we believe, the stories that we tell, the stories that we, because it's going to take, you believe a story about you, the programming of the world, the programming of religion, the programming of your surrounding culture, whatever. You believe that story so much so that you act it out. It is part of you. And then when one embarks on the journey and begin to uncover those stories spoken and believed, that individual has to create new stories. That communication with self. You have to now begin to speak to yourself. I remember times when I was broken. I was a single dad with 4 boys, Marcus, so I know some of that.
Yeah, that's the same situation.
I know some of that conflict, if you will. But with my kids, I found myself, Marcus, many times on my knees, kneeling before them, asking for their forgiveness because I handled a situation wrong. And I learned much from that space on my knees with my children. It taught me to be humble. It taught me to respect and honor them. And so I've been there where your dad has been. And one of the gifts that I had offered my children, as your father did you, was I told them I was proud of them. I do not want you to live my life. This is yours. I am simply a vehicle that is ahead of the road that you're walking on, and you can access data from me at any time. My decision was to inform you of it, but I always left it in their hands to make the right decision. That's whatever it was. And so that is a gift that your dad has given to you, and it is a powerful gift. So as you're moving through, you got in, and your seed is once you got there. When you began to learn some of the nuances, Marcus, of communication, how did it begin to affect you? And how did it begin to affect your engagement with others outside of you as you are learning all of these tools? And, as I said, the nuances of and the art of communicating.
Yeah. So straight after university, I went to be a missionary teacher, Bible teacher in South Korea. And I was there for 5.5 years.
Wow.
Halfway through that time, yeah, wow. Halfway through that time, I say my faith expanded. I didn't want to proselytize what I didn't believe. So I stopped being a missionary. But I continued teaching, and I loved teaching. So I got my teacher training there in Thailand, went on to Spain, went on to Saudi Arabia, then back to Thailand. And you asked the communication skills that I was amassing, how did it affect in the way in which I was connecting with the world? That's how I understood it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So my job, I've had literally hundreds and thousands of conversations, quite easily, because I'm sitting down trying to parse this language that's inside this person's head. I'm teaching conversational English 6, 7, 8 times a day with many different adults, kids, mothers, businessmen, college students. And 2 things are happening. One, I'm finding the intersection of the human experience in all these different cultures, right? I'm also teaching online. So I'm finding the intersection of humanity. Yeah. Understanding, oh yeah, this is the through line. This is what everybody's going through. And you're right, it's a story. Yeah. The second thing that helped me do was I understood, if you get the principles of story down, if you understand what a protagonist is, conflict, they're moving towards their desire. There's internal conflict, there's external conflict. When you understand all these things and you orchestrate them right, you become the story writer and the storyteller, and that's very empowering. Yeah. You then start to craft as the protagonist going forward. A metaphor I like to say is, in a story, there are 3 things. You have the writer or the director, if you're talking about film. This is the person that directs the attention. The most valuable thing, you're right, and attention in time. Yeah. The second thing you have is the audience, the one who's watching what's happening, and they're making meaning. The third person you have are the characters. Those are the ones on the stage having the desires and agents. When you realize you are the actor, the audience, and the author all in the same, you are writing this story, and that really taps into your creative power. So those are the 2 things I learned. I learned the intersection of humanity, and I learned how to live a beautiful story, how to write life.
Yeah, that is powerful, Marcus, because and I tell people to try to learn to experience different cultures. When one does that, you become a little more empathetic. Patience become part of your expression in dealing with others, because as you said, you have hundreds of thousands of people, and each one of them has different personalities, and each one of them at different levels. So you must learn and allow patience to be a companion of you. You have to learn so much when you are dancing within cultures and belief systems, whether religion, whatever that belief system is. it keeps one humble, Marcus. It did me in a sense where I recognize that all the other plays that are going on within the world is just as important as my play. And so I have to honor them, all of them that is before me. And I think that's what we have to do in this life, because we criticize each other's play when we ought to honor each other's play, because everyone's play is written differently. But we must learn how to appreciate it. So here you are, you're mixing within the culture, you're learning, and you kind of began to crystallize, and you saw the three pieces that one has to deal with in themselves to access that creator that resides in us. As you're moving through your life, because I know how life is, it's not all rosy, Marcus. Things happen.
And it's not supposed to be, you know? You got
It's not. It's not.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think anyone that expects that and those that haven't really encountered anything has no flavor, if you will. Has no flavor because they haven't been, as the Japanese has put it, their vase hasn't been cracked
Mhm.
so that you can take the gold and begin to mend it. And so here you are, and you're moving through life. Talk to us, Marcus, when those undercurrents began to happen to cause the earthquake to have your vase drop on the floor and crack as you're moving through life. What were some of those underpinnings, if you will, and what was that caused you to begin to be broken? Because now one has to learn much there. What were some of those underpinning that you discovered in your life that as you're moving through?
Two come to mind. The first one actually is similar to Psalms 1, where it says, "Blessed is man who doesn't walk in the," I can't say it exactly, but in the sense, walk with those who are cynical, sit in the council of wicked, and
Yep.
so on. And
Who sits in the seat
I'm,
of the scornful? Who sits in? Yeah. Yeah.
so the whole point is aligning yourself with people who are
Yeah.
in the same direction as you. That was one of the bigger lessons. I am welcoming to a lot of people, and when I say I'm welcoming to a lot of people, I hold no judgment for people in the way they navigate their life. One of the lessons I learned though is be mindful of the influence they will have on you if they become permanent fixtures in your life.
Yeah.
And setting up boundaries to be like, hey, that's not me. I'm setting up this distance in love because I do love myself and I want to respect the person you want to be. If you can't
Yeah.
change the people you're around, you change the people you're around.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That means you'll be an influence on some people, and some people it's just like, yeah, I gotta vibe you out of my life, vibrate you out.
Yeah.
That was one thing. The second thing that I've learned in one of my major breakings is as you're living with integrity, if you know you didn't do anything wrong, that's where your peace of mind comes. Just navigating spaces and people, I'm not gonna blame it on the image that brown dudes with afros have, right? I'm not
Yeah.
gonna blame that. Does it influence it? I think so. But again, I'm not gonna wear that as a victim to be like, woe is me, because also I know how I navigate spaces, the energy that I bring. I know that I'm a gift, the present of showing up as best as I can. And if I'm not received, I know still my value. So again, in the inner space, when you know you operated as best you can, and you made restitutions for anything you may have broken or faulted in your value system, then be at peace with it, and you move on to what you're called to, towards your desire. And when I say towards your desire, I believe everybody's worthy to pursue their desires as long as it's within the line of well-being towards yourself and well-being towards others. Life supports those who support life.
Yeah.
And if you're sincerely doing that, and other people hold disempowering stories of you, don't live in the stories of other people.
Yeah. One's
Well,
opinions of you is
I
not you.
yeah, it's not my job to get caught up in those stories. And I could go into the details of it, but at a very high level, it was just like, oh, that's what you were thinking? No, that wasn't it. That was not it
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah. People's interpretation of who you are is people's interpretation of who you are.
Yeah.
But one must know who you are, and that takes courage. There are certain principles and spaces one has to visit in order to get to that level. I had to learn how to forgive myself because I believed some of those stories. I had to learn how to exchange some of the things. One of the things that I carried in my life was, as a painful situation, was guilt. I had to learn how to deal with that. And as I brought in tools to assist me with that, one of the tools that I brought in, Marcus, was meditation. One of the most powerful things I've ever encountered in my life. It actually saved my life. When I began to be broken, if you will, and the undercurrents began to happen in my life. And this is a journey. There's not just one time, it's just like, so I introduced meditation into my life and walked away from it. You know how we get, be distracted.
Yeah.
And then the next thing you know, there's another undercurrent. And then you're like, wait a minute, I have to get back to basics. You have to get back to the place by which you know where you are. If you don't know who you are, guys, someone will tell you who you are.
That's actually the problem with the challenge of the
Yeah.
youth with social media today. We're noticing
Yeah.
it in the science. They're forming their identity behind the screens.
Yeah.
Let's say it in a word. So that when the screen is closed, they don't know who they are.
Who they are. Yeah. It is one of the most precious and most dangerous space for an individual to be, in the sense of allowing someone to tell them who they are because they don't know. And so that's why I said on the onset, your profession, because I think every one of us came on this planet with a gift that one must do, an assignment, if you will. You and I both grew up in the church. I remember Jesus went to Isaiah, and he read Isaiah 61, pulled out his assignment, and then he went around healing the sick. We know that John the Baptist, his assignment came and he did his. No, I'm not that one. I'm doing this. Peter, and I use this example with the disciples. Here's these guys were working. Their John was a fisherman. These guys were working. And Jesus looks at them and says, that's not who you are. Follow me, and I'll show you who you are. And so your assignment on this planet was to be fishers of men. But like I said, the natural realm is a foreshadowing of the spiritual realm. Your gift is communication, a foreshadowing the natural realm. Your dad and you and the family had some issues with communication, but it is your assignment. And so we have to learn how to become aware of some things, and your gift is precious for those children that are there because they need wisdom, guidance, insight to assist them to see the greatness that is in them. So here you are, Marcus, you've had some disturbance. You had someone began to show you how to put those little pieces of gold within the broken vase as you began to mend yourself as you're moving through life. What were some of those tools? I mentioned meditation. I know you had mentioned one from the beginning of your conversation, writing. What were some of those tools that you began to bring into your space, Marcus, to assist you to move from one space to the other? What did you, from your knowledge and studying, did you see and brought into your corners, if you will, to help you?
Man, excuse me. I would say the beauty of it, Ken, is that when I say writing, that set me up for a lot of things that are happening in the third act of my life now.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example right now. When I was 16, I wrote a poem called I Am. And I'll say the first part of it really quickly. It goes, I am a messenger, sanctified to speak with a divine voice and know it was not of my own choice, rather God's will be done, because I am part of a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a special person used to proclaim the praise of him who called me out of darkness into the marvelous light. You see, I am the mic. and the Lord is my control. So every time and it goes on and on and on. It's a poem about identity, right?
Yeah.
In the show up framework, this is what I do in my work as a life coach with parents of preteens, for parents of preteens. S's start with a strong identity. So that's number one. And it's virtues and values. It gets very specific. Virtues are with all humanity. These are the 24 virtues from Virtues in Action. One of the, if you will say, gold pieces that made me stronger in the broken places is virtue spotting.
Yeah.
What virtue spotting is looking for the good in things. The world moves towards your expectation. And when you're looking for the virtue in other people, they start to reveal that to you.
Yeah.
Again, virtues, the things like creativity, perseverance, leadership, all of these are in all human beings. Virtues and values. Values are what's important to you. For different people, it's different things. For some, it's family. Other people, it's finance. Other people, it's faith. Like, that's what makes you uniquely you. Another thing that helped me in this was being able to see people, get their story, and then retell it back to them in an empowering way. And that comes back to your first message, the first question that you asked me: how do I help mankind, or how do I help people or men?
Yeah.
I give them the skill of my storytelling back to them to help tell them an empowering story about themselves. Because again, I believe I've been given the voice and the gift of the divine to see the beauty in them. There's this writer, her name is White. She wrote this book called The Desire of Ages. She said of Jesus, he's the master teacher who never saw people for just who they are, but rather who they could be through his influence.
Wow.
And I think that's what a good teacher does. And the teacher doesn't say, I'm putting this on you. Rather, the teacher says, I create the context for the beauty that's in you to emerge.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those were three things. Again, my identity from the beginning. The second one was virtue spotting in other people, because now I'm living life like with assuming positive intent, but also bringing positive intent within myself. And the third thing was, giving people the story back to themselves of what I see.
Yeah.
And I'm owning it. This is what I see. You know, like, you can believe what you want to believe, but I'll hold this belief for you until you're ready to accept it.
Yeah, it is a perfect example of what you're talking about. Jesus is doing his thing. There's a pool, it's called the Pool of Bethesda. All the sick people, invalids all over the place. And he comes, Marcus, and he zeroes in on this one guy. Now, you remember, this is Jesus going around healing all. I mean, we read scriptures where he went around healing everybody. I mean, this, that. But then he comes to this pool, probably hundreds of people. Let's say 50, 60 people. Let's go with that small number. And he focused on this one man, and he asked some questions about him. He inquired. And he was informed that this man has been here 38 years. And Jesus looks at this man and he says, hey, do you want to be healed? What a powerful question. But the fact that Jesus zeroed into this one guy is very fascinating to me, because this whole place is busy. Everyone, was waiting for this angel to touch this water. And the man responds, yeah. He didn't say yeah. He said, while I'm going to the water to get to the well, someone else gets him before me. Marcus, Jesus had to locate the man as to where was he. Are you satisfied with your position? Are you okay where you're at? If you're okay with where you're at, he needs to know. And so Marcus needs to know your story. And so once he begins to expound your story, he will begin to show you some things about you in your story. Jesus did it, Marcus. So Jesus saw that this man really wanted to be healed. And watch what Jesus does to him. He says, you rise and get up. So now Jesus began to tell him a story that he can be healed, but he needs some stuff from him. You got to get up, bro. So now he has, his desire is to be healed. So if he desires to be healed, that little thing we call faith, Jesus looked at him, he saw it. You recognize it, you call it different things. And when Jesus saw it, he looked at him and he says, that guy, let me have a conversation with him and he'll get his healing. And the man had to pick himself up. Jesus said to him, rise. And so it's going to cost you some work. You got to put in the work. And Marcus said, you have to be willing. And Jesus asked him, are you willing? You have to be willing. If you're not willing, you're still going to be at that pool waiting for something, just going to miss it. And so when God brings people in your space, guys, be very attentive. One must live in the present. And as you live in the present, God will present before you. So here you are, Marcus, you're doing your thing. How did your mission, because you mention it within the poem, your mission, how did that begin to crystallize and become a process by which now you are going to meet others? As you said, the life coach would pair. How did the process with the children, how did that now begin to crystallize from your poem to the reality of your life?
Hey, there's this phrase that I say, it says, a classic is made in the moment, yet realized in retrospect. And I used to share that when we taught To Kill a Mockingbird, or when we were talking about the civil rights movement, because I taught high school English language arts. And Martin Luther King, when he was giving the greatest speech of the 21st century, that was a freestyle. He had done it many times before, but Mahalia Jackson was at Lincoln Memorial, and she was like, tell him about your dream, Martin, tell him about your dream. And then he goes into that cadence, right?
Yeah.
Harper Lee, she was writing of her authentic point of view for her time to a message that was very pertinent. And this is what it is. To your question, you asked, where did I make the connection? I had put in so many reps before. I've had this conversation so many times of the well-being of kids and the well-being of people in human development. Then a moment presents itself where it says for you to show up authentically to speak to an issue that's pertinent for this time. And the classic is made in the moment, yet realized in retrospect. I'm planning to do this so there's this book by my 5th graders. When they become parents, I want them to know that there are principles and ideas and concepts that I put out there so they could show up for their preteen kids. This is the classic being made in the moment. And even if it's a classic for an audience of one, for myself, right? And I'm going to realize it in retrospect when I get a little bit more wisdom like you. How did it come into fruition? I started teaching in high school. I taught 5th grade, and then I noticed what the education system was more so setting up people to be controlled. And you know what? Let me say this. Anybody who's making an honest effort wherever they are in the service of people, I will always support you. And a system outputs what it was created to create. Yeah. The system is working exactly as it was intended to. That's why I'm a big proponent of micro schools or smaller pods of teachers. I support homeschoolers. And I recognize public education in the United States. I just think technology is going to drive down the cost of education and the access for education. And I want to empower parents to teach virtues and values to their kids. So all of that was just to say, I want to lean into what I know, and I want to be authentic to me, doing what I uniquely was given. Like nobody else was given this story. I have to live out this story. And I wouldn't be fulfilled unless I did. That's the crazy thing about it. When you realize, like when I told my dad, for better and for worse, you've always allowed me to be myself. I told him that after I lost some money for him, and where I thought he would be upset. He forgave me and he said, Marcus, you're going to do what you're going to do. And if that's the case, like, do it. And there was support in it because the pivot that I made lost us money there. But then it was also like, hey, dude, if this is what you feel like doing, go run for it, pursue it. Just in that moment, that was, I don't know, that was another thing, another milestone along the way of understanding how my father fed into my life. So I feel I got off the track of the question. But no. How did it eventually come into fruition? Just me living authentically step by step by step. And that's how I arrived here. And finding gratitude in the moment with every step.
Yeah, it is, as I stated, the thread, Marcus, has been there all along. And one thing leads to another, the schooling, the high school, the 10th grade, all of it leads us into our purpose so that we become purposeful in our living, purposeful in our waking up, purposeful in our conversation, purposeful in our relationships. All of these things are to bring you and I to become purposeful in how we present ourselves every day, all day long. And when we get there, as Marcus tells you, you feel as if you couldn't be doing anything else. Anything outside of where you're at is not where you're supposed to be. And so you will get there, you will know it is a space by which one enters into a degree of rest. There is a space by which one gets into a degree of knowing. There is a space, regardless of what's going on, if there's a tornado spinning you out of control, one knows where one belongs. And when one knows where one belongs, one will not move by what is being seen and heard. One will stay focused and allow time to cause that whirlwind to slow down, because one is engaging in prayer, one is engaging in meditation, one is engaging in activating the tools that are necessary to assist in the quietness of that storm. You guys have been listening to us have this conversation. There's a lot of parents out there. I know I've been looking at my data. I know there's a lot of parents out there. There's a lot of family out there that listens to the program. And I want to invite you to come and engage at the feet of Marcus, learn from him. We're going to provide his access, his information for you to get to him. Those kids that you have that need help, those parents that need help. I have someone that has been through some stuff. He's been through a long journey, and he has some insights and knowledge that he can give to you so that you can assist yourself to see the greatness in you, and so that your children can see the greatness in themselves, so that they can allow the Creator in them to rise up and tell their story and not let social media tell you their story. Marcus, it's been a pleasure, man. I know we haven't even touched the surface with some of who you are and what you do, but I want to make you available to the audience so that they can come into your world for you to assist them with their need that they have with themselves and with their children. So thank you, man.
Ken, thank you. I mean, for sharing your platform, for hosting with your questions and being so engaging. It was a beautiful moment. Thank you for co-creating it with me, for allowing me to co-create with you.
It's my pleasure, my honor.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.